We're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Just go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
And, it's kind of cool that the Cowboys have had a couple iterations of, all-time dominant, all-time great, offensive lines. It's, it's kind of like in their DNA almost.
It's October 2016, Cowboys at Packers. This is Remember That Game, a podcast about sporting events that take you on a journey and maybe chart the path of the zeitgeist. I'm your host, Thomas Emerick, and my guest is Brandon Thorn, offensive line and defensive line analyst for Establish the Run, Bleacher Report, OL Masterminds, and proprietor of Trench Warfare, the newsletter and podcast.
I think it starts with the big three of Tyron Smith, Zach Martin, and Travis Frederick. Having three guys who were probably the best at their position on the same line at the same time for several seasons is something that is pretty unprecedented. And, that's really kind of what drove everything. And then, the other two positions were filled by underrated guys who were, pretty good themselves. So, yeah, it was just a very well-rounded unit that had, is more star power than really any we've seen since. And, maybe that we'll ever see again.
Yeah, and I know you wrote prior to the 2016 season a piece about how underrated Doug Free was, the longtime veteran there. It's been through many stages of Cowboys football in the 21st century. And how crucial was it that, you have Tyron Smith on one side, but on the other side, you have someone that doesn't leak?
Yeah, Free was, probably there's just an interesting dichotomy there with him being the weakest link, because Ronald Leary was a better player at left guard, but, not just the weakest link, but also a guy who was very underrated and overlooked because of that. And oftentimes, I think inappropriately or wrongly maligned, because if anybody was going to lose on that line, specifically in pass protection, it was going to be him. So, those losses got magnified, and I think it skewed how, effective he really was overall, relative to the rest of the right tackles in the NFL. It's just on that line, it was kind of easy to pick on him. So I wrote that article, in 2015 or whenever I wrote it, just because I always appreciated his game. He's one of those players that somebody like me who loves offensive line, enjoys watching because he does a lot of little things well. And he's really good at compensating, for his deficiencies. And I love seeing players like that who maybe are at near the end of their career or are just athletically limited. His case was, he had a variety of injuries that he had, that had taken a toll on his body. So he had to really figure out ways to get the job done that were unconventional. I think he was very savvy and a smart player. So, it just takes a closer look to appreciate somebody like that. So that's why I did the article. And yeah, he was, he was good enough to keep that line, to the point where they were the most dominant line of the decade. And all things considered, I think he was probably an average starter.
And going into this game, the Cowboys and Packers, both with only one loss going into Week 6. Cowboys lose Roma right before the season, have a 4th-round rookie Dak Prescott, starting the team off 4-1. They were only 25-1 for Super Bowl odds heading in. Packers at an NFC best 8-1, and they go into Lambeau and start making that statement early. And as they're building out their lead, there's some plays that you actually highlight. Travis Frederick gets across and clears Clay Matthews out of the hole. They run some outside zone there, I believe. How crucial was Travis Frederick to making this whole thing sing?
Yeah, I mean, Frederick, for me, I think he was the best center in the league from almost the moment he stepped into the NFL, but more so probably beginning in like 2014, 15, definitely 15. And I think 15, 16, and 17, he was the best center in the league. I think with him, to me, the thing that stood out the most was his play strength. You just don't see a lot of centers that are able to generate the amount of movement that he was able to do at the point of attack. He was extraordinarily strong and powerful as well. And then that's on top of being very smart, very tough, just a well-rounded player in terms of pass protection and run blocking, could do it all. And I took a strong liking to him because also he was the worst athlete in the NFL at the center position, according to the combine, which, I generally just think is very overrated for offensive linemen, at least, the athletic time drills and stuff like that. So it was cool for me to see and to kind of, bring light to that, the fact that this guy is, quote unquote, the worst athlete in the game, according to the combine, yet you see him in space, picking off linebackers, in space, picking off defensive backs even at times. And he was just, his play speed was elite. And he's a great example of what mental processing can do for how fast a guy plays the game. So he had it all, and he was dominant for several years there. And, he was the best guy in the league.
Yeah, I remember you scoffing slowest 40 time among centers, sharing that clip of him getting outside to take Clay Matthews out on a Zeke 30-plus yard run in the first half. Cowboys get out early, some backfield motion, throw them off, especially on an early touchdown to Cole Beasley on the out. Cowboys end up getting up 10-6. Travis Frederick, as you're saying, had the best center in the game around that time. And I know you're also writing mid-2016 and during that season how Zach Martin at right guard, the best right guard in the league. And then you have Ronald Leary at left guard. In your thread of clips there, you talk about how Tyron Smith and Travis Frederick on the pin and then the two guards on the pole. How crucial was it to have zero weak links, not at right tackle with Doug Free, and then not at left guard either when Leary and Zach Martin on the move?
Yeah, I mean, the unit can have five guys who are, average or better, then, you can have a functioning offense. But what made the Cowboys so special was not only did they have that, but then they had three elite guys and then a guy in Leary who had some very good elements to his game, really as a run blocker. And just what they were able to do in the running game with him and the other three was just really, really special. So, it was just so unusual for an offensive line to have as many strengths as they did, and their entire offense was built around it. And it's kind of cool that the Cowboys have had a couple iterations of all-time dominant, all-time great offensive lines. It's it's kind of like in their DNA almost.
And how far does their current iteration have to go to have their weaker links be as strong as what they had in Leary and Free? You got Connor Williams at left guard. Lyle Collins has come along, is probably one of the stars there now. But then, new center, and it looks like Joe Looney, and then Connor McGovern might be factoring in there as well. These supporting players, along with the big three, how far do they have to go to kind of reach the, solid, above-average level that Free and Leary brought?
I mean, I think Connor Williams is the closest. I think he's made some strides. I think he's on his way to being more of a positive than a negative overall to the unit. Just some things to clean up in pass protection, that transferring inside like he did from Texas, to the pro game. It's been an adjustment. He's also dealt with injury as well. But I think he brings a lot to the running game. He's athletic. He can move. He can get out in space and do things there. And then he's also pretty good at the point of attack, really physical player. But in pass protection, using his hands and, just the timing and placement of those against, high-level competition still needs a little bit of work. But all things considered, I consider him a solid starter with the ability to rise, to get to that above average level. And I think it needs to happen in pass protection. And then Looney, he's, clearly never going to be Frederick. And, he's kind of a stopgap guy. They have multiple guys there that could take his spot this year, rookie from Wisconsin, and then also possibly McGovern. Yeah, and we haven't really seen those guys play yet, so kind of hard to say how far they have to go.
This unit in this game in Lambeau, Packers 5-point favorites. Packers defensive line does give Dak a little trouble early on in the game. Peppers gets a strip sack that helps Green Bay keep pace in the first half, and no slouch for a front seven there either. Probably a super underrated unit with veteran presence of Peppers. Clay Matthews a little past it by that point, but then you have rookie season Kenny Clark, peak Mike Daniels, and Nick Perry. I mean, you were on how great this, you were writing all about how great this Cowboys offensive line was even leading up to 2016. But in the second half, when you have high volume expectation and a lower yards per carry expectation, they still fed Zeke. He still got over 5 yards per carry in the game. Were you surprised at all at how much that Cowboys line was able to just get it done on the road against a super underrated Packers front?
No, not at all. Just considering I think of them as the best offensive line of the decade, and they were at the peak of their powers that season. So not a surprise at all. But that Packers front was outstanding. So you win some and you lose some against some elite competition like that.
The unstoppable force gets Dallas out to a big lead, 20-6. The Packers front seven really good. The back seven a little more on the rough side. Pro Football Focus had that Packers by the end of the season they gave them the top 7 run defense and pass rush grades, but the 31st ranked coverage unit in their grading. Darius Gunter in this game right before the half gets burned by Terrence Williams and Bryce Butler in succession. Pushes a 13-6 Dallas lead to 20-6 before the half. Dak Prescott had broken Tom Brady's record for most passes to start a career without an interception. Eventually, his streak is broken by Morgan Burnett, bad pick in front of his own end zone. Prescott, at the end of this game, the Cowboys end up holding on to win. Tom Brenneman, who is in for Joe Buck was doing MLB postseason at that time, he says, and let the debate begin. The next time the Cowboys take the field, is it Prescott? Is it Romo at quarterback? Were you 50-50? Were you more toward the side of interested in seeing Romo come back at that point? Or were you more bullish on having Dak see it out by midseason?
Didn't really have a really strong opinion either way. I mean, kind of leaned Romo just because, the win now factor, and just having a guy like that come back, maybe they would have been in a better position to win now, even though Dak was probably the future. But yeah, so probably lean Romo if I had to pick.
The Cowboys inside zone in this game was cooking. I know you've described it as the best inside zone you've seen. This unit could do it all schematically, right?
Oh yeah, they did it all. They ran outside zone, inside zone. That was kind of their bread and butter. So yeah, but they could do it all. I mean, they could run power. Pin pull was one of my favorite things to see. Some of them getting in space, especially Zach Martin. But yeah, so they were very, very diverse, and they came up under Bill Callahan, and then so they were exposed to great coaching as well. So yeah, I mean they're probably like the most capable offensive line in terms of like schematic diversity that you can imagine.
Yeah, that coaching tree in Dallas for offensive line in the past decade, you go from Callahan, who coaches up Frank Pollock, who coaches up Mark Colombo, Callahan now in Cleveland, Pollock with the Jets, Colombo with the Giants. Is this the best OL coaching tree in recent memory that you can think of?
Yes, probably. I can't really think of an offensive line coaching tree that I'd compare with it.
Yeah. Yeah. McCarthy on the Packers sideline for this one. He'll be on the Cowboys sideline this coming season, God willing. Do you anticipate any changes, schematic tendency, or focus under a new coaching staff, or do you think it would be more closer to status quo?
Anytime a new coach comes in and you have some turnover like they've had at center, they're going to try to adjust some things, but, I would think that with guys like Collins and Martin and Smith still there, that you want to play to their strengths and what they're most comfortable with. So probably a little of both, honestly. And, I don't really think it matters a whole lot what you run with them. As long as, you have some balance, then, I think they'll be able to kind of execute, whatever it is that they decide to run.
We're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Just go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
Yeah, and on the other side, McCarthy's coaching that Packers offensive line. Bakhtiari had some stretches of the best pass blocking out at left tackle at certain points in recent years. And then you just had a steady group across the board. Treader, Setter, and then across TJ Lang, Ryan Balaga at right tackle. Do you feel like Aaron Rodgers, his type of maneuvering in the pocket, undersells or oversells how good this offensive line was?
Definitely. It undersells it just because, when you have a quarterback that holds the ball, as long as Rodgers tends to hold it, puts a lot of additional stress on the offensive line. Now, granted, he can make, magic happen as well, but, there's a balance there, and there's a side of it where the offensive line, particularly the tackles, just have more pressure on them than maybe any other group in the league. So, yeah, I mean, it's a synergistic relationship there that, partly why the tackles have been so good is because Rodgers can bail them out sometimes, and partly why Rodgers is so good is because the tackles bail him out. That's just kind of how it's always been, and that's why I think it's, he's going to have to adjust his style of play this year, because they got significantly weaker at right tackle. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
In your 2020 OL rankings, the mid-August, you have the Saints as the number one, the sole unit in the elite tier. Would either of these offensive lines here and on this day in October 2016 fall into that elite category if ranked against the lines this year? I mean, definitely the Cowboys, but maybe the Packers too?
Yeah, and the Raiders as well from 2016.
Right.
Would probably be the teams I think of first.
Jackson and Osemele at guard. Osemele also on that Ravens Super Bowl line that could push people around. Yeah, next to Burke and then Marshall Yanda. Dip in play in recent years, but if he's back at his peak level of play, how would his style fit in with the Kansas City Chiefs? Is he a type of player that could potentially make that unit push further up in your offensive line tiers?
Maybe I have, I didn't make any changes to their ranking when KO got there. So, because I need to see it from him. I mean, the
Right.
last couple of years he's been a shell of himself.
Yeah.
So, we'll see. I think the ceiling is higher now as opposed to having Wiley there. But, at left guard at least. So I think Wiley will play on the right now. So there's potential now. There's more potential for them to rise. But, it's just we have to see what version of Assembly we're going to get because he hasn't really been, that 15, 16, 17 level since 17. So, it's just kind of a wait and see approach. But because the coaching's so great and that's the most offensive line friendly scheme in the league, aside from maybe the 49ers, that's why I still have them where I do. I think they're going to be solid just like they were last year, just like they were the year before.
San Francisco, especially outside zone. Would you take the current Niners outside zone against even the not as good as their inside zone, but still great outside zone of this Cowboys 2016? Is this the most beautiful outside zone attack you've seen starting offensive line there in San Francisco?
Really it's because of Kittle and, the fullback. Those two guys, man, I mean, what they're able to do, what they add to the scheme, how they're able to attack defenses. Those guys are so dynamic that it just makes, the whole system that much more potent and fun to watch. So, because those weapons there, fullback and tight end, are so unique, I think that they probably are the best outside zone running team that I've seen. And one of the best just run blocking teams because they do more than just outside zone. So, I mean, that's probably just like the most fun offense to watch just in general because of how well it's designed.
As far as just blowing people off the line and then mixing in some trap and power and misdirection, and I reach back a little further, but how do you feel about that Harbaugh Niners offensive line and offensive attack in the early part of the last decade? And which flavor do you prefer more, that kind of zone-heavy approach of Shanahan or what Harbaugh and Greg Roman were throwing at people years earlier?
I tend to lean towards outside zone if they're both being executed at their highest level, just because I was kind of brought up as a diehard Broncos fan. So, the outside zone scheme is just kind of like ingrained in me as being my favorite when it's operating at a high level. So, but I mean, it's kind of a push really at this point in just my career and everything, just having an appreciation for all schemes that are executed at a high level. And what the 49ers were doing under Jim Harbaugh, all that misdirection. It was incredible to watch, just a heavy gap scheme. And they had great personnel to do it with as well. So that was one of the more fun offensive lines, that I've ever seen. And just, again, offenses in general, just with the stuff that they were doing, kind of ahead of their time in some ways.
I was seeing if you had like a clear idea what your favorite tackle guard or guard center combo is at this moment.
Tackle guard, I think the best, at least left side tackle guard combo is the Colts with Costanzo and Quentin Nelson. Second is probably Bakhtiari and Jenkins, honestly. But yeah, those left sides, that left side tackle guard combination, those two are just a ton of fun to watch for different reasons. I mean, Bakhtiari, what he does in pass protection, Jenkins is just like, it was just an outstanding rookie who, is a big, powerful guy who is pretty fun to watch. And, obviously in Indy with Quentin Nelson being what he is. And then Costanzo has long been one of the more underrated tackles in the league for the last 4 or 5 years. So they're really fun to watch. That's probably my favorite tackle guard combo on the left side. I mean, on the right side, there's some turnover over there now with, Yonda retiring, Frederick gone now. That would have been my favorite guard center combo. I love Pouncey and DeCastro in Pittsburgh for guard center combo. I really like what they do. And then like a right tackle, right guard combo. I mean, Brandon Brooks and Lane Johnson is easily the best, but Brooks is hurt, so you can't really count them now. So it's probably La'el Collins and Zach Martin, honestly. I mean, I think La'el Collins is probably the best run blocking right tackle in football. And Zach Martin's, to me, he's been the best overall offensive lineman in the NFL for 5 years now. Just my opinion. He's just like a machine. So those two are a ton of fun to watch as well.
And later this season, the Packers and Cowboys have a rematch, this time in Dallas. Dramatically, Aaron Rodgers and the Packers pull it out. But then they go visit Atlanta, and an offense run by Kyle Shanahan slices and dices them. And we've seen Kyle Shanahan do this with so many different colors of jersey at this point. Was his work creating space with his offensive line the most awe-inspiring you saw from any individual coach this past decade?
Yeah, I mean, it's, his incorporation of motion, pre-snap motion, I think has really kind of been a big part of what's taken the wide zone scheme to the next level. And then he also is diverse, in terms of what he runs as well. I mean, they'll run trap, they'll run power, they'll run other things. So they really keep defenses on their toes. They create a lot of hesitancy and deception. And then, as we talked about earlier, their tight end and fullback are dynamic. So, yeah, I mean, it's tough. It's tough to think of one that does it at a higher level than Shanahan. I mean, maybe, I don't know. That'd probably be my first pick, honestly. I just think that offense and how much it helps the offensive line with the things that they do pre-snap and just creating a lot of uncertainty in defenses just really helps them. And man, I mean, he's just he knows how to find weaknesses in defenses and attack them in a multitude of ways.
Combos that are in some of the offensive lines that are in the upper reaches of your rankings over at Establish the Run. Some great analysis. I encourage everyone again to check out his take on every offensive line over there. Which of these units that are near the top, not at the peak of their play yet, or maybe one piece away, but is there a unit you envision getting anywhere close to the quality of the 2016 Dallas Cowboys in the next 2 or 3 years?
Not really. I mean, maybe the Saints, because I feel like they're the best offensive line in the league heading into the season. There's a little bit of uncertainty there now with a new center guard starters. Eric McCoy, right, from what I heard, is going to move over to the right side, and Cesar Ruiz is going to take over at center. So a little bit of uncertainty there, but they certainly have potential to get close to that level. But I don't know. I mean, they have the best tackle combination in the NFL, I think, easily. Maybe the best left tackle and maybe the best right tackle in the NFL at the same time, which is kind of reminiscent of the Cowboys, in terms of having two guys that are the best at their position. But then, left guard Andrews Pete, he's like a top 10 left guard to me. And then McCoy, man, I mean, I think he could be special. So, but we'll see about that switch now, how he looks at right guard. I thought he was, easily a top 10, maybe even a top 5 center last year. So, but we'll see how that goes. There's just a little bit of uncertainty there, so it's hard to say. But I think if one unit can get close to that 16 Cowboys group would be the Saints.
Especially if Cesar Ruiz can hit the ground running from day one, anything like Travis Frederick. Anything you'd like to promote?
I mean, you said they established the run, so definitely that's where I do all my writing, and just like really I get to expand on my thoughts there. So that's a lot of fun, and I'm really thankful for that platform. And my Trench Warfare podcast that I host, I have a lot of fun doing that. I've had some great guests on there. Just probably at this point 20 or 30 starting NFL offensive linemen have come on. I'm starting to get some defensive linemen on now as well. I've had a lot of coaches on there. I think probably like 3 or 4 of the best college offensive line coaches in football have been on. So yeah, if people want to hear them, and their insight, then I'd recommend checking that podcast out. You can subscribe to that, pretty much anywhere.
The Trench Warfare podcast is fantastic. I don't remember how early on it was, but I loved that Ryan Jensen interview. And I just remember thinking, man, Brandon Thorn's going to be getting some great guests and some great interviews out of these underrated offensive linemen.
Yeah, I appreciate it. That was one of my favorite episodes as well. Jensen's a guy I've been able to meet a couple times at the Offensive Line Masterminds event, and he's from Colorado, and I lived there for a while. I was born there, so we've kind of had that connection. And yeah, so it's been cool to talk to him and pick his brain, because I've loved his game before I met him. When he was with the Ravens, he was just one of those guys who was, every snap was like a bar fight, and those type of guys are just so fun to watch on tape. And he's just a scrapper, man. I mean, he's a 7th round pick, who's, but he became the highest paid center in NFL history when he signed his deal. So guys like that are pretty special. And it's been really a pleasure to just get to know him and talk to him and do some work with him and stuff. It's been awesome.
This has been another episode of Remember That Game. Please rate, review, subscribe, and check out more episodes.
This Valentine's Day, Instacart's making it easier to go all out for your special someones. From ordering candy and card supplies for your kiddos' classmates, yep, all 27 of them, to getting ingredients for a romantic dinner made by you. Whoops, smoke means done, right? Or treating Fluffy with a new chew toy. Oof, that won't last long. Download the app to get delivery in as fast as 30 minutes and free delivery on your first 3 orders. Offer valid for a limited time. Minimum $10 per order. Additional terms apply.